All right, we are live. Hello, good evening. My name is Khalilah Slade, and welcome to Trauma Live. This is part of the Way Forward series, where we're just looking at what do we do next for people who are in the community who are hurt and going through healing, basically, but by what's happening in the world. So we're just putting out some tools and some strategies on what to do next after protesting and after after we've raised our voices, now what to do. So I am Khalilah Slade. I am a licensed clinical mental health counselor, also a licensed clinical addiction specialist, and I am joined here by an awesome cast of expert panelists on trauma. We're going to be talking about trauma and how it affects men and what they can do about it. And so joining me tonight, I have Dr. Brenden A. Hargett. Dr. Hargett is a counselor, consultant, trainer, researcher, and counselor educator with years of extensive clinical experience in a variety of settings. Dr. Hargett holds a PhD in rehabilitation counseling and rehabilitation counselor education from North Carolina A&T in Greensboro. He is a licensed clinical mental health counselor, a licensed clinical addiction specialist, a nationally certified counselor with a master's of addiction counselor designation. Miss Dr. Hargett was also appointed to by Governor Roy Cooper to serve as a member of the North Carolina Commission for Mental Health, developmental disabilities, and substance abuse services. He also serves as vice president of the board of directors for the North Carolina Foundation for Alcohol and Drug Studies, and as a mentor for the MBCC National Board for Certified Counselors Minority Fellowship Program. So join me in welcoming Dr. Hargett to our panel.
Yeah, Hargett, put the R in there.
All right. I'm sorry, Dr.
It's all right.
Hargett.
It's all right. Thank you.
Welcome,
Good to be here.
welcome. All right, next we have Dr. Jason Branch. Dr. Jason Branch is a licensed professional counselor in a total of 5 states, Alabama, Georgia, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, and an approved clinical supervisor. Dr. Branch has more than 15 years of experience in the mental health and counseling profession. Dr. Branch has worked in community agency and mental health centers, city government, and substance abuse treatment facilities. Dr. Branch has maintained a clinical private practice since 2010 that focuses on adults, adolescents, couples, and families. Dr. Branch currently engages in professional and scholarly work focused on African American male experiences, mentoring multicultural issues, and increasing the practice of self-care for helping professionals. So join me in welcoming Dr. Branch to our panel.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And next we have future Dr. Wesley Wade.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Go ahead and claim it.
That's right.
Yes, indeed.
Mr. Wade is a career counselor for the College of Sciences at North Carolina State University in Raleigh. He is also a licensed clinical mental health counselor, a licensed clinical addiction specialist, and a certified clinical mental health counselor with a small part-time private practice called Forward Counseling. Currently, Wesley is working on his PhD in counseling and counselor education. He's also leading an initiative for autistic college students in North Carolina and working on a podcast called Peace, Love, Power, which focuses on aspects of mental health not commonly discussed. So thank you. Let's join us in welcoming Wesley Wade to our panel.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yes, thank you all for being here. So tonight we're gonna unpack this issue of trauma and the African American community as it specifically relates to African American men. I think trauma is one of those words that kind of gets watered down because we in our community, at least in the clinical community, we say it a lot, and so the layman may not even know exactly what trauma is. So tell us what is trauma.
I'm gonna let these fine brothers right here break that down.
You want to go ahead, Jason?
So everybody passing the buck today.
I mean, it would not be appropriate for me to go
this
first.
Is the exact example of what trauma is like. I don't want to deal with this today. I do not want to deal. So trauma, by definition, is a deeply distressed or disturbing experience. So when we're dealing with trauma, especially with trauma with Black men, especially with Black men, thinking about childhood, thinking about events that took place growing up. I feel as though a lot of Black men have experienced trauma in a variety of ways. As simple as education. If we look at the education system, growing up in public schools, private schools, but being a Black man in the educational system, criminal justice system, trauma. We have family, maybe relatives, directly or indirectly. We've all been impacted by the criminal justice system. So education, criminal justice, family, history, roots, culture. I mean, you name it, relationships. In almost every facet of our life, we've been experienced with some type of trauma, either directly or indirectly. And the trauma that we've experienced from the past has an effect on our lives currently. So when you think about trauma, it's not just one thing or one area. There's several areas, and all of us have been affected by it, either directly or indirectly.
Yeah. And I'll add to that. And I think that, as we talk about the experiences that we have, and particularly when we talk about defining it, I like to use the term it's an emotional wounding. It's something that in terms of emotionally that creates some level of turmoil. But what happens? How does it affect the person? Because there are some of us who experience trauma, whether it's in education, criminal justice system, or otherwise, and they're resilient, bounce back, and there are no problems. But then when there are the lasting effects, to where it affects how they interact with people, what they do physically, emotionally, etc. So I think when those things happen, or they have experiences or events that create an emotional wound, and then those effects tend to linger on for a period of time, and that's what we identify as the trauma too.
Right. And there's really not a whole lot else for me to say on that, because Dr. Branch and Dr. Hargett just expanded on it incredibly well. The aspects that I'll add to it is, a lot of times when we hear trauma, we think about intense, violent situations, right? But violence doesn't always mean the physical violence of, one person hitting another or something along those lines. It can be. It's not always related to someone who maybe was in the military, maybe was deployed. Like, there's multiple ways that we can get trauma. We don't think about the continual compounding impact that racism, microaggressions, all these things has on someone's life over and over and over again. That is a type of violence too, right? That creates trauma. And, as men, I'll say, I'm a little radical on this piece, but I look at myself as someone who is in recovery from toxic masculinity. This is something that I work on. Now, I love my masculinity, but I recognize that grew up in this environment that demands a certain type of masculinity, especially from Black men. And there is a trauma along with that as well, where you're told to grit your teeth, shut up and cry, rub some dirt on it and walk it off. There is a trauma with that, and I'm in my late 30s now, just really starting to realize how deep that is and has been throughout my life.
That's awesome, Wes. I'm glad that you touched on it. Let's talk a little bit more about that. Like, how does that impact men, especially African American men? That whole "you have to be strong" narrative.
Yeah. What comes to mind for me as Wesley talked about that, you all remember the scene from Glory, Denzel Washington's character, where he was being whipped and he was just standing there in a way to hold it, and just because he'd been taught and trained, okay, you don't show any emotion. And I think that for a lot of African American men, it's you stuff it, don't talk about it, don't share how you feel, because you're less than a man if you show any emotional expression at all. And I think a lot of that goes back to even, you start talking about slavery and what things were like for the African American male. And so it has kind of evolved over the years, but that masculinity, be hard, be a man, and that's kind of has kind of passed on from generation over our generations.
Mm-hmm.
In addition, I feel like, if we've been dealing with this trauma and dealing with these things and never having an opportunity to express our emotions, or if we have to hide our emotions, they come out in other ways.
Right.
So for a lot of Black men who's never had an opportunity to express their emotions, their vulnerability, then it comes out through behaviors. And if I'm trying to cope with life, I got to find whatever's simple, whatever's easy. And that could be alcohol, drugs, it could be women, it could be money, it could be jobs, anything that I can do to kind of get some of that pressure off of me. But I'm doing it in secret. Nobody knows that I'm doing this, because no one can find out that I'm not able to handle my own, because I've been taught that I have to hold the world on my back. So that's the family, that's, my job, that's me, that's my children. I mean, it's everybody. So I feel as though for a lot of Black men, we don't have an opportunity to just take a break. We don't have an opportunity to be vulnerable, because we haven't been taught that. So for a lot of us, when we're holding on to this, holding the weight of the world on our shoulders, we hold it so long and it becomes our natural way of being. So we don't even know that this is not okay, that this is not healthy, that this is not working. This is just what I do. So for a lot of men, when they have unhealthy behaviors in their mind, like, this is just what I do, they may not be aware that this is how I'm coping, not really how I'm doing, but this is how I'm coping. So I feel as though a lot of men may be dealing with that, because we never had an opportunity to have conversations exactly like we're having now, of men who don't mind being vulnerable or sharing this information. Because if you think about generations before us, our fathers and grandfathers, they definitely weren't having conversations like we're having right now. And that's how that trauma can continue over and over again.
Absolutely.
That vulnerability piece is something that's really personal to me. I do have to give a shout out. There's a young man in here that I know who said, "What up, Big West?" I see you, Elliot. What's up, brother? So the vulnerability piece is part of this layered issue with trauma, especially when you're talking about Black men, from how I see it. And y'all put it so eloquently. We don't have, as Black men, we rarely have the opportunity to start looking at our vulnerability, because we're so busy on all these other notions of manhood and expectations and balancing all these realities that are placed upon us. And that vulnerability, not engaging in that vulnerability, prevents us from really receiving the healing that we need. There are layers of trauma that, I mean, anyone has, but especially when you're talking about marginalized populations, Black populations, Black men, and then even to a greater degree, Black women, in all honesty. But like I'm trying to like limit my self-disclosure. Sometimes I over self-disclose. I'm just like an open book kind of person, but
come on, share Wes.
I'm really open about
bring it. That's why we're here, baby.
That's
it.
All my people know that, like, I just, look, I ramble. Okay. So part of my thing is I've known I probably had ADHD. When I got into the master's program, Khalilah and I were in the master's program together. I was like, okay, this is probably real. And flash forward, I'm practicing. I'm like, this is real. I had an incident in my doc program where I was like, all right, I'm not dealing with this anymore. This is never going to happen to me again. I'm going to get a real diagnosis. I'm 37 years old. Okay. I have pushed that off for 30 plus years and just started addressing it now and realizing how much this neurodivergent aspect of my personality impacts all of these other things. Right. There is trauma layered within that. When you talk about, for me, the intersectionality of being Black and being neurodivergent, I haven't even had the opportunity to be vulnerable in that aspect, because I have been dealing with maintaining this, whatever you want to call it, this facade, this status quo, this weight of expectations that's put upon you. It's real and it impacts you. And, for those of us who have the privilege to, have a partner, I have an amazing wife who is brilliant and helps me out. She points this out frequently. And like, we're here in COVID, we're locked down. We're strict over here. Like we don't play with these lockdowns. Like I ain't doing nothing. Man, you are forced to look at yourself. And I am realizing how much anxiety I really have, how much being hyper vigilant throughout my life has really played into this. This is all trauma. I haven't dealt with this stuff because I've been dealing with all these other things throughout my life. So that it's, we need people to talk to in order to be vulnerable. And I'm thankful that I have multiple Black men in my life that understand dynamics of the shared experience we have as Black men, and that, we can be vulnerable, and some of us working on being even a little bit more vulnerable as well.
I
Thank you for sharing that, Wes.
Yes. And I greatly appreciate, the comment related to, we're being isolated in quarantine and you have to look within. And I feel as though this is the first time for many Black men of ever stopping long enough to look within.
There you go.
And not having the distractions. Pre-COVID, we had a lot of distractions. A lot of Black men had a lot of different distractions to occupy space and time, not to deal with self. And now with COVID, with the quarantine, I'm faced with me. So, when if you're a single man, like a lot of these things that you would go out towards is like you got to deal with yourself. And if you have a partner, then you're looking within of what's going on with me and what's going on with my partner. And to me, like this quarantine has been a gift and a curse. And that gift is we finally get an opportunity to just stop for a moment and check in with ourselves. And I really appreciate you, Khalilah, with having this forum for us to have these conversations, because if you think about it, I don't know how often we were having these conversations before now, outside of the barbershop, outside of these small spaces, but now it's bigger. And for me, with Black men being able to identify with other Black men who don't mind sharing their vulnerability, sharing their truth, sharing their experience, to me, it gives us all permission to speak, permission to look within, permission to say, you know what, I don't have it all. And I'm realizing that other Black men are dealing with the same thing that I'm dealing with.
Yeah. I think, and as you all were sharing it, a thought that came to mind for me, I think, for us, because we do this work, we understand, how to engage in a conversation and talk about it. But a lot of our buddies don't know how to have that conversation, don't know where to start. And so, as you mentioned earlier, hey, I go to the bottle, I go to this, and I'll find all these other alternatives because I feel something emotionally going on. And of course, drinking and using any kind of substance, it changes the way I feel, but it really doesn't deal with the issue. So I think it's a matter, how do we help our men to have these conversations? And of course, we know how it is when you start talking about going to counseling. It's like, man, I ain't going to see nobody. I ain't crazy. It's the first thing that comes up. But it's like sometimes just hanging out with your boys and just being real. Somebody that as you talk, Wesley, about being vulnerable, and that it's a scary place for a lot of us. But at the same time, there's growth in that. So being able to nurture, to recognize that, hey, I don't like what happened to me. I don't like what's going on. And it's okay for me to say that to somebody.
Yeah, that's so true. So, we're all therapists here on this panel, and we all know the terms and we all know, the symptoms. But for laymen, for people out there who don't know what trauma feels like, how it impacts their life, can we give them some symptoms of, how will you know that, trauma is impacting your life?
So I'll give a few. One, you can just be lethargic. You can feel sluggish, right? You can sometimes that everything is going okay as it is right now. Like there's nothing really bad, but man, you just cannot get enough sleep, right? I'm typically an early riser. At we're getting near our 100-day mark of being here quarantined. Like around day 50, I could not wake up before 8 o'clock for nothing. I usually get up at 4 a.m., 5 a.m. I could not get up no matter what it was, right? These can be signs of trauma as well. Being short-tempered can be a sign of trauma as well, right? People might say that you're, flying off the handle for something that's not even that big of a deal. It's just like your skin is thin because you got stuff that's just right here, festering below the surface that you haven't dealt with. Those are some of the ones that stick out to me. Dr. Hargett mentioned a great one with, substance abuse, coping, right? Are we going to the bottle? Are you smoking something? What's going on? I mean, people are in all different states, so it's not legal here in North Carolina. Well, certain CBD is legal, but like, you know, what are you doing, right? And you know, I mean, that's a big thing. Like, there's nothing wrong with having a drink. You know, people have different opinions on that. That's fine. You know, I'll have a drink every once in a while, but I'm trying to be really cautious of how much that is. You might find yourself drinking more frequently. Those are the things that I notice. I know there's a lot more. I'll keep mind to that.
Yeah. I guess the thing that comes to mind for me is just the tension and feeling on edge, and you know, we use that term as anxiety, but just feels like you have all this energy that's pushing you, and then of course that may lead to taking a drink or taking a hit off or something. But it's that tension, that edge, that uneasiness, and sometimes, and I think what a lot of times it begins to manifest itself physically. Whether that's I'm not getting enough sleep, or just, you know, I'm having gastro issues and I'm feeling this tension in my body. And I think that a lot of times individuals tend to associate it with, I'm just tired, I just had a rough day. But it could be the manifestation of this trauma now is just kind of playing itself out, and it having some physical manifestation of that. And of course, the tension that goes with that, whether it's in headaches or other things as well. So the physical aspects of it is very, very real.
Absolutely. And I'll add with the mental and emotional aspects of it. If you think about, you know, for a lot of Black men, with the videos of the murder of innocent Black men, that's triggering. It's very triggering, where a lot of Black men watching these videos and feel a part of it, as in this is happening in real time. I don't care how many times you watch it or when you look at it, it's triggering and traumatic, because there's a lot of Black men, as I mentioned before, directly or indirectly, has had some type of run-in with the police in some kind of fashion. So if you think about it, if I've never talked about that incident, if I never bring it up, it may have happened when I was 12, 13, 20, I'm triggered by that experience that I had. And just for me personally, I don't watch any of those videos. I haven't watched any of them.
I stopped.
I can't handle it anymore, but I didn't know that I couldn't handle it at the time. So I kept watching them just like everybody else.
Right.
And imagine for the men who still haven't realized, hey, I can't keep watching this because I'm being re-traumatized. I'm going through, you know, I'm not only experiencing the loss of a brother that looked like me, that could have been me. Also, that was me at one point in time. I didn't lose my life, but there was an incident that happened between me and police. So those are other indicators of that emotional and mental trauma or triggering that happens. So therefore, if I experience that, I may become angry, frustrated, and don't even know why. So especially if someone comes into my path that doesn't look like me or doesn't represent what I view as my culture, I may feel triggered, and I may have to, I feel like I have to defend myself. And that may be verbal, that may be physical, it may be isolation, it may be, you know, frustration, that I have to protect myself because I feel, again, vulnerable, but I don't know this is vulnerability. This may be a trigger, but I didn't know that I was triggered. So a lot of it, we're just not aware. And I feel as though us, because we're mental health professionals, that awareness, a lot of this stuff we have to learn about ourselves in order to do the job that we're able to do. And a lot of men just don't have that opportunity.
Man, look, I gotta keep rolling on this point. I'm sorry, I don't know if you had another question, but Dr. Branch hit on but both y'all hit on so many things. The viral sharing of these videos of unarmed Black men being killed by the police, or anybody, because Ahmaud Arbery wasn't killed by the police, right? Trayvon Martin wasn't killed by the police. And even when it's the Black women, there's plenty of Black women who are getting killed by the police in these situations. We don't tend to talk about that as much, but it's really real. You know, my wife is Black, my mom is Black. That's trauma too, right? And so there is two components in this for me. One, social media. Social media is a blessing and a curse.
Absolutely.
I love social media, in all honesty. Like, I'm on it. I love engaging with people. I have met a lot of amazing contacts from social media. I have gotten opportunities from social media. I like pouring a lot of my thoughts and emotions on my Facebook page sometimes, in blog format and other stuff. And even with this podcast I've been putting together here, like, I love that. But when I am feeling directly impacted from a traumatic event that brings up all of these reflections of the things that's happened to me in my life, all the close calls I've had in my life, because Trayvon could easily have been me. Tamir Rice could easily have been me. John Crawford could easily have been me. Ahmaud Arbery, the list goes on and on and on. And it brings all of these emotions, all of this undealt with trauma, or for me, like loosely dealt with. I've been working on it. I'm a practicing patient, right? Loosely addressed trauma that I've been working on. It brings it up to the surface. Well, I have a policy of arbitrary policy that I put on myself, which I don't recommend for anybody. It's a bad decision. I go on about it in the blog, but I've only deleted 2 people ever, or unfriended 2 people ever from Facebook, right? And I have a wide group of friends. For a lot of people, I'm like their Black friend. I got homeboys who've been in NFL, medical doctors, researchers, doctors of counseling, buddies who've been doing other stuff, right? Who've been locked up, and I love them, and they're amazing people, and they're brilliant. They just had different circumstances they got impacted by. I have white, Black people from different nationalities, LGBTQ. There's a lot of different people in my timeline. And so in moments like this, now I'm mad. I'm triggered by these things, and I'm scrolling through Facebook, not as much Twitter, because I don't know people like that on Twitter, but I'm scrolling through Facebook, and then you see someone say something stupid, right? Something, y'all know exactly what I'm talking about, man. And really, I have myself to blame, because I said that I'm not deleting this, which is a dumb, arbitrary rule that I put on myself, right? And there's a whole, I could dive into that, like white acceptance, white gaze, the reasons why I don't feel like I should do that, but I haven't. And now I'm angry. And like I really don't respond as much as I used to, but now I'm hate scrolling, as I call it. You know, and next thing you know, you're throwing your sleep hygiene off. Now I'm up to 3 a.m. hate scrolling through Facebook, talking to people about it, sharing all this stuff. Look at this fool saying that, blah, 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 blah. Now I wake up the next day, I'm back on it. Now I'm still working. I have my job. For anybody looking, I'm doing my work. I'm doing my job. But then, you know, next night, 3 a.m., hate scrolling, 4 a.m., hate scrolling. And so it throws you out of whack, right? Yeah. Because you've dealt with all these things. It's very real to you. This isn't theoretical to us as Black men, right? Majority. I mean, not everyone, we're not monoliths, but the majority, right? And so it throws us off. And then when we're talking about vulnerability, I've rambled a little bit. My ADHD makes me ramble. I'm trying to make it concise. Vulnerability and talking with other Black men. I have some chat groups. Again, the love of social media, where I talk to Black men. Someone in here said, like, the question of, you know, what is Black masculinity defined by who? I talk about that. That's a aspect of vulnerability. I was just having a conversation today with some of my homeboys who I love, 2 Black men. Khalilah, you know, one of them, we did our master's program with them. And we were talking about this whole beef with J. Cole and No Name, and you know, what did it really mean? And you know, what is that? How does that define us as Black men? You know, what is this really sexism and all these things? And now we're getting to a conversation about, you know, toxic male masculinity, how the unique relationship that has with Black men. And there's a level of trauma within that too. But if we didn't have that space to talk as 3 brothers who love each other, who can be honest. Love doesn't mean that you're just nice to someone all the time, right? Because like, if you didn't know us, you look at our conversation, you're like, they go at it. But we love each other, man. It's an edifying conversation. Yeah, let me cut it off there, so I'll keep around. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important to have those outlets. And it's like, you know, it's unfortunate that a lot of men don't have those outlets. And then, you know, I think we're all fortunate to have counselor friends, therapist friends that we can kind of bounce things off of. You know, but when you don't have that, it's like, what do? You know?
Absolutely. And I feel as though, again, with COVID, those outlets that we did have to hang out with the fellas, we don't have it anymore. You know, the barbecues, the hangout, the barbershop. You know, for me, I feel as though the barbershop a while back, the barbershop used to be the place to go to just connect with the guys. You don't have to know anybody in the barbershop, but it's familiarity and we're able to just talk and process. And we lost that. We really lost that. That's just one spot that you're going to go at least, 2 weeks or a couple times a month that I'm going to be able to just be. I'm present. I can be myself. And a lot of us have lost that. So if it's not the barbershop, it may be, getting together with the fellas, playing basketball, going to, a bar, concert, whatever. We don't have it. And now we're resulting to having get-togethers via Zoom like this.
Right.
And with my guys, I have a group of friends. There's about 10 of us. And we have Zoom meetings, and we've met more through Zoom than we have regular because it's convenient. However, there's a huge piece that's missing. I can't physically connect or touch, give dap. Like, I don't remember the last time I dapped somebody.
Right.
I hurt from that. Like, that's my connection. That's how I connect. So just think about so many men who don't have that outlet with other men. And because of COVID, like we don't have a lot of the resources we did have, we don't have anymore, which could cause us, ways to do more unhealthy things in order to cope.
No.
Yeah. I mean, you guys kind of touched on, the link between, oppression and racial injustice and trauma. And I just wanted to add to that is, like Wes said, it's not just the videos. I mean, with the enhanced conversation now, it's all of the residual effects, this kind of new awareness too, that can be traumatizing too, because, many people are looking at it like, okay, like you're getting the calls from your ally friends, you're getting the new conversations at work and the meetings on diversity, and it's almost, that is even almost a little triggering, I mean, am I alone in that?
No, you're not alone. It's not a little triggered. It's really triggered, right? And man, I don't want to sit in any conversation at my job about racism. I really don't. And it's not because I don't think it's needed, but as Black people, period, not just Black men, Black people, we tend to compartmentalize our personal lives from our work lives. Absolutely. So a lot of times you just don't see us having this same level of family and connection at your job. Not always, right? But overwhelmingly, when you work with in a diverse space or a space that's predominantly white, and you're like, oh, you're part of the family, and you're like, oh, y'all ain't my family. Who making that macaroni and cheese, right? Like, it's not the same, right? And while I'm fortunate to work in an office that is pretty diverse racially, all across the campus, it's a wonderful campus. I love it. I'm not going to say anything bad about it, but people are people regardless of where they're at, right? And you have people who sometimes are well-meaning who make these microaggressions, right? And those are the same people texting you like, oh my God, please let me know if I can talk. If you need someone to talk to, I'm like, you don't want me to talk to you because I'm like this close from telling you the truth. And in the words of Jack Nicholson, you can't handle the truth, right? Like it's not going to happen. Your fragility is not going to allow that conversation to go well if I really go all the way there. And I'm just really hoping that people don't keep bringing these things up too much, right? I mean, there's been some of them, the ones where they are allowing, the Black folks to have their own space and talk, like that's fine. That's different. White people need white spaces to talk about racism. Like they do. They need to be able to say the wrong things and work through it and get it right. Because I'm gonna be real right now in this frame of time, as Wesley Wade, your patient counselor, I'm not that patient right now. I'm really not. Like we're all in this thing. We got stuff going on. I can't really be the one for you, right? And so it's real. Speaking of vulnerability, again, talking with the homeboys, right? Because we can't meet in person, so we're talking on Zoom and text and message. We've had a whole conversation of what we've called white guilt messages. I'm sure everyone here has gotten some. And, for the people listening to this, I'm not saying every single white person who sent me one is a white guilt message, but some of them definitely are, right? There's some that are like friends that I know well or that I know like loosely that have been great people. I love it. I really appreciate it. There's other ones that's like, yo, I ain't talked to you in like 4 years. Right? Like why are you telling me you're going to lay down in a line of fire for me? Like what?
Yeah.
Like how about we just do something a little different, right? And so yeah, that's traumatizing too. Like what am I going to do? How am I going to respond? You put me in an odd situation. If I respond a certain way, I'm not being true to myself, and that hurts, right? If I respond truthful, now I got to deal with the blowback from you, and it's just,
Right. We call it code switching.
Yes.
We got to go to work, and I think one of the challenges and what you were talking, Wesley, kind of stood out for me is that we're dealing with our own responses to what's happening in the world as Black men. As you said, we can't talk about, I can't share everything that I feel in this space at work, but then too, we're looked at to be the experts on trying to solve it. So I'm in the middle of dealing with this emotionally, but yet and still I'm asked questions about what's next. And I guess it does create an opportunity as well to educate and to help inform so that organizations and entities can be more responsive to these kinds of things as they come up. But still, I have to deal with my own emotional stuff that I carry as it relates to what's going on in society. So I think that's the challenge for us, is that we have to, okay, I have to be this way, but I also have to be that way, but I'm hurting too, I'm feeling this as well. So how am I going to manage and balance all of that and still, do a good day's work?
In addition, so for me, it's, for all of us, we're dealing with a lot of the same stuff. And I found that I can't manage it all. Dr. Hargett, you mentioned, being in that balance, finding that balance. I haven't been able to find it. And I haven't been able to find it because, as a mental health professional, I have a responsibility to support my clients, and my clients are dealing with so many different things. And then, they're sharing their stuff, which I'm taking on, that's my job, it's my responsibility. And the same thing happens for students. I'm a faculty as well. So I'm dealing with it from the students, from colleagues, from the media. I mean, I'm dealing with it from everywhere. And for me, I have to, or I started to disconnect, where I started to choose to protect myself, where number one, I got to protect my peace. And protecting my peace, we may not be able to have a conversation about that right now because the conversation may turn into hands. And I don't want to do that.
Right.
So we may not need to talk about this right now because I'm just not in the place for it. And a lot of Black men are viewed as the experts on it. But the truth is, to me, it's not that hard to treat people as human beings. So imagine how traumatic it is. I'm watching my brother being killed on television, and it's triggering for me because that could have been me. And I've had a run-in with the police. And now the people who are putting their knees on my neck is asking me to tell me or to teach them how to handle me, how to work with Black people.
That's how the knee feels.
How the knee feels. Yes.
Oh,
that's traumatic within itself. Or I'm sorry, you had to deal with that. Oh my God, I didn't know this was going on. How do we not know this is going on? So it's even more traumatic for me, and I have to protect my peace, my mental and my emotional health. So sometimes I just disconnect. And there's guilt that comes with me with disconnecting, because I do feel as though I have a responsibility, but is it to my own detriment? So finding that balance, Dr. Hargett, I haven't been able to find it yet. And to me, like, that takes work to find it, and I haven't been able to do it.
Yeah, me and a couple of buddies a couple of weeks ago, as this thing was unfolding, we kind of committed to say, we're going to tell people I am not okay. And that's where I am. And don't ask me no more questions. That's all you need to know. I am not okay today. And leave it at that. And again, that allows that space, as you say, Jason, to kind of protect your peace and say, hey, I don't ask me, how are you doing? I know what that means. I'm not okay. And so I think we have to take responsibility for that. And I think, as we, have our friends, cousins, community members, and others don't always know how to do that. So we see the rage, we see the expression of anger to where it just spills itself out physically, emotionally, and lash out at whatever's in my way, whether that's a building, whether that's person walking by who look like they want to help me or just look different. And that's I think that's a result of the trauma, and particularly when we start talking about constantly being re-traumatized, whether it's not only looking at at the incident over and over, but listening to the media and the slant on stuff and how we're presented and represented, that in itself is constantly playing in our minds in the background, and that in itself can be very, very a weight. And so, creating spaces for men to say, hey man, you need to say a few choice words and do whatever and drink some of this. I'm with you. I understand that. And I think that's the validation that a lot of our men need, to say it's okay to feel what you feel, because society has told us a long time, even during slavery, you can't feel, you can't express yourself, you can't even look at this person because you're going to lose your life. So I think it's like, you feel what you feel, and it's real, and it's okay to feel that.
That's good. That's good. You want to say something?
I was.
Wes. Okay.
Go ahead, brother.
I'm good. Go ahead.
This point is just something that, I mean, we've all been wrestling with. It hits so hard, especially when you have some people that you've known, that they don't have to be white, but they're not black folks that and you see them going through this, like, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's that whole devil advocate thing. And there was like a MLK quote that I love that was about that, something about, shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than like an absolute misunderstanding of people of ill will. Right. And I love that quote because it hits me right here. If you're someone that I grew up with, or, even a parent of someone I grew up with, or someone that I just kind of made the assumption that you saw my full humanity and gave me the right to be human, because we have that right to express all of the emotions of the human spectrum. And then when I see you kind of like tiptoeing the line on this, it's like, no, man, like I'd rather you just be like completely out there with a hood on or something like that. And like, it's because ambiguity can make a relationship worse, right? Like, and so if you're not clear on where you stand with something, it can ruin that relationship, but it can also cause trauma for the person who is on the receiving end of that damage too. And this is so real in this moment. And like Dr. Hargett, what you said is so beautiful, because when you were talking to, your brothers that you love and you care for, if anyone who's watching this, you're like, man, I just don't have the words, man, it doesn't matter. Just say something, right? Whatever. And we got to be accepting of each other. I've had homeboys who've texted me some stuff that was really troubling, but you know what? They're going through it. And some of their experiences have been way worse than mine. I'm in a very privileged space, and I had to recognize that and just be like, hey, man, I love you. I respect you. I don't know everything that you're going through, but I know you're a good person, and we're going to get through this. If it's not one day at a time, 1 hour at a time, one minute at a time, like we're going to break it down to the smallest increment just so we can keep moving forward.
All right.
Yeah. That's thank you for sharing that. That's true. And I mean, I love what you said, Dr. Hargett, about, saying that I'm not okay, and it's okay to say that, what are some other, tools that we can, give people who are, dealing in this space and like trying to figure out and navigate, okay, what can I do? How do I deal with these feelings that I'm feeling?
So for me, because of our profession, number one, therapy. Getting a therapist. Just a couple of resources. Number one, Psychology Today, www.psychologytoday.com. Put in your zip code, find a therapist in your area. And for a lot of Black men, therapy is like, nah, I'm good. I don't really want to do that. I don't want to go work with somebody who doesn't look like me. There's all these beliefs and ideas and myths about counseling. But a lot has changed since, counseling several years ago. I mean, you have 4 clinicians of color right now on this call, that are able to see clients. So that belief that there's not Black people doing the work, we're here. We're actually doing the work. So finding a therapist. Therapy for Black men is another resource. And Google, you can always go to Google to find a therapist. So to me, number one, try therapy. And for me, I would say try therapy more than you need therapy or go to therapy, because trying it gives you an opportunity to take some of that pressure off of, I have to do this. I have to go. And if we're looking at the stigma and the beliefs and the barriers that we have about counseling, especially with Black men, it's harder to even consider counseling at all. So to me, try it. See what happens. Find a therapist, and to me, being able to go to a therapist to process and get that stuff out, to me, is the first step. Being, COVID, it wasn't my choice that I have to look within, as Wes said earlier. But if I choose to go to a therapist, I'm choosing to look within. I'm choosing to talk to somebody who can help me see things that I can't see, those blind spots, and uncovering them and peeling back those layers. So to me, that first thing is let's try therapy.
Yeah, and I think even in the conversation, when you say, "Hey, go sit down and chat with someone," we have to work in our community to destigmatize mental health issues. I mean, and the data, and you all seen it. The data is out there that our African American men are overdiagnosed with all these extreme diagnoses, and I think we have to help them understand what this is and what it's not. Because many think that, okay, you're gonna go lock me up in a facility and I'm not gonna be able to get out. But I think as we recommend, say, hey, go sit down and talk with someone, explain to them what that experience may be like. And I think that certainly to give more information about what it is, and not always labeling and putting diagnoses on it, because again, the community I come from, the first thing they say, man, you think I'm crazy? No, that's not what we're saying. Let's really talk about what this means. So yeah, destigmatizing as you refer, kind of destigmatize.
Yeah, definitely the destigmatization of therapy is real. I had a conversation with several young Black men that I was talking to who were expressing some issues during this time. And these are young men in their like mid to early 20s. And some of them have seen some therapists before, which is great. And I was saying, like, this is a time where, it sounds like you got some stuff that you need to get off your chest and you need to talk to. There's a lot going on with this. And they were like, yeah, but now I gotta go to a new therapist and explain all of my stuff all over again. And I'm like, okay, well, you could do that or nothing. Like what are the options that we're balancing out here, right? This is not an easy time for anyone, and therapy is a great option, right? And it's not the way that people always see that it's depicted in TV and movies, right? It's a conversation where you can be honest. You can be fully honest. This person is an unbiased person that you can, unbiased professional clinician that you can talk to, right? And they can help you unpack what's there. I saw like a really good image that someone did where it showed like two people in therapy, and it showed like a thought bubble, and the client's brain was like this ball of yarn, and the therapist was just unwinding that ball of yarn, right? As you're a counselor, I'm not telling you what to do, right? I'm not saying go here and do that. I am working through what you are talking about. Hey, you said this. Have you ever thought about how that relates to what you said earlier, right? I am listening to you and just helping you unpack these things using the training that we have. Now, there's great things in addition to, this is not in supplement, or this is not in place of, this is in addition, this is in supplement to going to, a licensed and certified counselor, is, taking some time to sit down and reflect on your own. Right.
That's good.
There is like this spectrum of what's going on right now for us in lockdowns. Some of us are by ourselves and all we got is alone time. Right. Some of us are with our families, and I don't know what alone time means, and I desperately need it. So like, you need to find a way to get some alone time, some space. You got to arrange it with your partner. Right. And so during that time, I try to turn the phone off. I try to not get on the computer, and at least spend 15, 30 minutes just being by myself with my thoughts unpacking. Sometimes I got to write some things down. I one of the things that happens when we get in traumatic situations when it comes to coping is there's all different kinds of coping mechanisms, but in really traumatic situations, you can resort to old coping mechanisms that you did when you were younger that you might have put away. So there's some stuff that I did when I was younger that's been popping back in my head. I'm like, whoa, oh no, let's put that back in the box. But there's been other things, like I used to love writing lyrics and poetry and stuff when I was younger. I'm still a hip hop head, you know, and like, man, I've been writing, so I'm never gonna say them because I'm not good, but I love them for they're therapeutic for me. But getting that stuff out there, like you need to do something as a release. I have a little tiny small postage stamp of a backyard. I got some tomato plants and some rosemary and some basil and some thyme that I take care of and I watered, and they were seeds, and they're like, you know, this big now and stuff. We call them Afro Hicks where I grew up. We grew up kind of Southern, like fishing and hunting. The old Afro Hicks when I grew up, they all had gardens, right? So I feel like I'm connecting with these old Black men and my dad that I grew up with that had gardens and did those things. And there's a cathartic feeling in that too. But these are not substitutions for seeing a trained professional clinical counselor. Like you need to see someone and work through this stuff, and it will pay off. And you might not click with the first person you find too.
Yeah,
right? Let me say that, right? Just because all right, I done worked up, all right, you know, they said did this, everybody's saying this, I went with this person, fine, right? And then you talk to them, you're like, man, that person won't feel like, okay, like try another, right? Like try a few more. Like, you're gonna have to talk to a few people until you find someone who can really click with you sometimes too.
Yeah.
So in addition to that, you know, my first response therapy and my second would be self-care.
Yeah.
So self-care is something, you know, that encompasses us from head to toe. And I use a model that I created called ESPM. So this model takes care of us when it comes to our self-care from head to toe. And that's emotional, spiritual, physical, and mental. So it's finding ways every single day to make deposits into your self-care account. So emotional, what is it that I can do that brings joy to my heart? What makes me feel good? What makes me laugh? So for me, every single day, I'm finding ways to take care of all four. So that's with the emotional. With spiritual, it doesn't have to deal with religion, spirituality. Think about what brings joy to my soul. It could be music. Every morning, I'm listening to something to get my day started. And that's how my day ends. Physical, think about, you know, physically, where am I physically spending my time? Am I always at home? Am I always at work? Am I always in front of the computer? Am I always at, you know, the bar, the club, or whatever? But physically, where am I spending my time? As well as, am I doing any physical activities? Taking a walk, taking a run. What am I eating? And especially now during this quarantine, to be honest, I'm sure a lot of us have gained a few pounds because we're just here. We're just at the house, and we may start consuming a little bit more. So think about that physical piece. And then the last is mental. We mentioned counseling. And to me, another part to enhance that mental well-being is being able to say, no, I can't. And especially for Black men, we've been taught to be everything for everyone.
Right.
And at times, like, when are we going to be just a little bit for ourselves? So to me, if we're able to make deposits in all four of those every single day, it allows us to enhance our mental, emotional, physical well-being. And to me, like, by doing that, that's going to enhance me as a person. So I've been practicing this for years, and every single day I find ways to do it, and it makes me deal with more stuff. And to me, the more I take care of myself, the more I can help other people, and the more things I can deal with day to day.
That's awesome.
That's good. I like that. Right. ESPM. Can I borrow that?
We're all writing that one down.
I like that.
Just go in just a little bit more. I want you to think about yourself, and this is for you all and the listeners and watchers. When you think about your self-care account, think about a bank account. And we talked about this trauma before where we're triggered. So if I have a zero balance in my bank account and I keep spending, there's going to be overdraft charges. So imagine how many of us, our self-care account is overdrawn. So if you got a zero balance in your account, you buy $5 a cup of coffee. That cup of coffee is now $35 because I got that negative. So a lot of us are trying to get to the zero balance, but not doing enough. So the more I have in my account, the more withdrawals I can make, especially as Black men, we're making withdrawals every single day. The moment I wake up and turn on the news, withdrawal. Social media, withdrawal. Wife, kids, work, withdraw. And if I'm not doing enough for me, I'm not going to be able to handle. So Wes,
that's good.
This is real. Wes, you have to take care of yourself. Yes, you have to take time for you.
Yeah.
Tell the wifey that we said, all of us said,
Yeah.
you need time for you because you take care of everybody. That's what we do as Black men. But how can we take care of everybody if we're not willing to take care of ourselves first?
Yeah.
Right.
That's
Put
good.
your oxygen mask on first, man. Yeah.
That's
Yes,
right.
it is.
That's right. That's good. Yeah, just thinking about like what brings you joy, and that's really good. I like the way that you put that about, you know, making sure that your self-care account is fully stocked, because that can be the one thing somebody says something to you wrong at work and boom, you know, or says something to you wrong or cut you off and boom, you know. So it's important to keep those things that bring you joy well stocked while you're paying attention to the news and paying attention to what's going on in the world. I mean, you know, there's some piece of that we have to stay tuned to. But you know, while we're managing that, it's important to make sure that we're managing our self-care. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Very important.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anything else you guys want to add? I mean, this has been very impactful. I mean, you've given us some tools, you've given us some tips on how we can stay healthy during this time. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, one thing that I was thinking about, you know, particularly as Black men, and as we talked about trauma and what it looks like, and trying to define it, I think for a lot of Black men, we have layers of trauma, either complex trauma. I mean, the fact that, you know, there may have been physical abuse, or there may have been emotional abuse, and then, you know, something else happened and I watched someone die, traumatic grief, and all of these things. And it kind of gets really complicated to, as Wes talked about, unraveling that yarn. I mean, that's a complicated piece. So I think that recognizing there are multiple things that can trigger that, and I think that, for example, you know, right now we're dealing with the racial trauma and what we've seen, and that alone can and have triggered a lot of these other traumatic experiences for people, because they feel those same emotions and feelings that they felt when they were physically abused, and now it just gets complex. And I think that, you know, as they have these conversations with someone, really, you know, someone that has the insight to be able to connect all of those dots and be able to kind of work through that. Because I think, you know, and I think about historical trauma, just the generational trauma, all of these things, it's just complicated. And that's our experiences in America. But on the other side of it, with our, you know, we've been resilient. We pulled on some of our cultural experience, whether that's music, dance, or what have you, as coping mechanisms through your ESPM method there. And I think that, you know, knowing that it can be complicated, and it may take some time to work through some of that. And some of it is painful. We don't want to deal with it. The fact that, okay, well, that happened 35 years ago, 25 years ago, you all right. And, you know, and I think our families sometimes minimize that. And so I think we help men to work through that and say, hey, man, it wasn't okay that happened to you. And again, you know, validate that. So the complexity of trauma for a lot of us. And then, you know, you can't fulfill the role that society has told you to fulfill. You know, I'm having difficulty finding, keeping continued employment, and that no fault of my own, but for a number of reasons. And you come home and you look at the person that you're coming home to, and they look at you a certain way. All of that can be very trauma. So I guess my point is, it can be layers of different things that individuals may be dealing with, and knowing that it's not just one thing.
Yeah. I'm gonna try to make this concise. So, you know, however old you might be, right? I'm gonna use myself as an example. I'm 37 years old. You know, it took 37 years for all of this to happen inside of me. I'm not just going to undo it in a matter of days, weeks, months. You know, it's years of work, and you can feel that progress, and it's heavy work, but it's good work. And I promise you that there is a benefit for you in that work. So, you know, we experience, again, we're not a monolith. I can't speak for everyone, but typically, you know, we experience life, you know, with through our identities, and we have a whole range of identities that we have. I am a man. That is a big part of my identity. And I'm a Black man, and that's another big part of my identity. And I primarily have grown up in the South too. And I've had to, live with the formation of my racial identity. We get these messages, we learn these things throughout our lives. They teach us things, but then as a Black man, we're taught that we're dangerous, that we're thugs, all this crazy, ridiculous. It's not even coded anymore, just racist language and stuff. And we all internalize this in different ways. And we have to work on being cognizant of how does this impact us. So often we are caught up in the reality of dealing with the immediate attack of racism that we don't get to work on the things that we need to work on for our own personal healing, right? And that is so very important to me. Another quick anecdote. I have a very super high energy, almost 4-year-old. She definitely gonna be ADHD like her dad. She's bouncing through the roof. And so we got to get her out of this house, right? So we go on walks. In the beginning, we were going on walks all the time, around 1 o'clock or so, my wife and I and our child. And it started to become a problem. My partner's like, what are you doing? Why are you so uptight? Hey, don't go there. Don't touch this. Don't go that. I realized how much anxiety I carry through being hyper vigilant through my life. I'm 5'11". I'm 250 pounds. I'm not little. I've been 5'11", 185 pounds since 8th grade. I've been a larger Black male my whole life. And so there is a level of anxiety and hypervigilance I carry from that. I had to pause and acknowledge that was, from me neglecting that, it was negatively impacting the people I love the most, right? The people whose health and well-being I am the most concerned about. So I had to pull back. Hey, I'm sorry, you're right. Let me pull back. And I spent some time working on something that worked for me. So I like cooking for them while they go on walks now, and I have lunch prepared for them, and I get some of that quiet time that I love. And so during that quiet time, I might listen to a podcast that I love. I might read something. I might just spend some time praying, maybe reading some scripture or whatever it is. I am spending time by myself, reflecting, trying to unravel that yarn. We need to recognize the realities of what we have. We are all beautifully flawed people, right? And there is a compounding layer within our identities when you talk about our masculine identity and our racial identity and how that impacts our everyday life. We have to pause and unpack that.
Very good. Thank you, Wes, for that.
For me, just final thoughts. I think for a lot of Black men, we forget that we're human first. We've been carrying the world, we just go, we just do. And for me, I think it's important for any Black male, those who are listening, that's paying attention here, is to give yourself permission to be human. And if I give myself permission to be human, that means I can't be everything to everybody. Right. And that's just taking time for me, giving myself permission to do what's important to me. And for a lot of men, we don't even know what's important to us because no one's ever asked. No one ever given us space to even find out what's important to me. So especially if you have a family, that's part of the first thing, because we've been taught you take care of the family, period, by any means. Therefore, that could be by any means of my own life, where I'm secondary when it comes to everybody else. But again, we can't pour from an empty cup. So I think it's important for men to start replenishing themselves by giving yourself permission to do so. The second thing is, what's a very uncomfortable conversation, is to become willing to be comfortable being uncomfortable. In my opinion, the only way that we change is our willingness to be uncomfortable. And every single day, find a way to be uncomfortable. What's something that's uncomfortable? Saying no. What's something that's uncomfortable? Being vulnerable, being honest about how we feeling, asking for help. That's uncomfortable. We don't like it. But to me, anytime that we're thinking about change, that's how it has to happen. So my challenge to all of you, not just Black men, but to all,
Yeah.
Become willing to be comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's how we change.
Mhm.
Understand that you're human first. Practice the ESPN model for self-care. You can use that, share it with other people. It's mine, but I'm giving it to everybody. I don't own this stuff. God gave it to me. I'm giving it to you all. Use this information to help you, because all I'm asking you to do is take care of yourself. And the last is therapy. Consider therapy. Big shout out to my sister, Priscilla Williams, on the call. She had to jump in, and I love the fact that
I was getting ready to call you out. I was getting ready to call you out.
Yeah.
So she wants to take partial credit, but she gets no credit. None. So you hear me live, you get no credit. And you can only get partial credit if you actually practice it.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So don't call me out if you're not ready to get called out yourself, Miss Williams. But I'm glad she's on the call. I'm so glad that Priscilla's on the call, because she's become an advocate for mental health because of my experience in this profession. You know, we've been family, and she watched how I've grown in this profession. And the more I'm learning about counseling, the more I share with her, and whatever information she gets from me, she shares it with others. And she's an advocate. She's an advocate for the profession, which makes me so excited. It makes me so happy. So I'm glad you're on the call. I'm glad you talking noise, because that's what we do. This is family all day. But yeah, like, we have to take care of us, because nobody else is going to do it. So much love to everyone for joining this call, for being here. To the fellas, to you. Thank you. So take care of yourselves.
Thank you. So as you all were talking, I know I said final thoughts, but something just came to me, and I'm spirit led, so I'm just gonna go with it. We touched a little bit about allies earlier, and I think one important component that's missing, maybe that some people don't understand, is that for us as African American people living in this country, we deal with racial stuff all the time, So now that it's publicized, and it's being brought to the forefront, and a lot of people are aware of it now, and it's this new awareness. It's like, everybody's talking about it, but we deal with it all the time, and microaggressions at work, in our communities, when we're out, just all the time. And so having this conversation, and conversations like this, kind of bring this stuff even further to the forefront. And I recognize that there are some people who truly just don't understand, what it's like for us to have to live this and deal with this, or what this even feels like, what this experience is like. They see these things on TV, think of it as isolated events, or events of a couple of bad apples, and they want to do more to help, but really don't know how to. So just as we're closing out, can we offer some tips for allies of any nationality who kind of see this stuff happening, and maybe have some African American family friends that they kind of want to reach out to and help? Like, what can they do that would be helpful?
Wow, that's loaded.
It is. It really is.
We could talk for another
I could
3
go
hours.
a number of different ways with that.
How much time we got?
Well, I think, as you talk about, having to deal with racial stuff, I mean, we as African Americans have to deal with the racism, bottom line. I mean, institutional racism and personal racism. Every day we're dealing with that. And I think for anyone, whether they want to be an ally, they have to understand the context of how it plays out, what it looks like, and that has to be an intentional effort to look for and understand. Okay, what is all this about? Understanding the history, where this came from, and how things. We kind of generally, people know the history of this country, and Africans brought here, and slavery and all of that, Jim Crow, but in terms of the structure and how things are built into systems, and we talk about dismantling institutional racism. And I think there are a lot of information out there for individuals who really want to help and to understand it. To be an ally, you need to understand its structure and be willing to be vulnerable to say, okay, here I am. This is what is happening. And again, it's one of those uncomfortable conversations, and as we use in our language, in turn, you got to be willing to have a courageous conversation about race with someone that doesn't look like you, and you may not like what you hear, but really being open to understand and hear, read, engage, have dialogue, learn as much as possible. And when the microaggressions happen, if you're in the room with me, you need to call it out as well. I mean, we're always addressing that, but as you see it in experience, if you're my ally, shut your people down who are consistently saying things or this microaggressions, micro insults, or what have you. But learn about it, understand it. When it happens, call it out. And I think Dr. Ibram Kendi talks about being an anti-racist. And I think that, people say, well, I'm not a racist. As he says, if you're not a race, not being a racist doesn't mean you're an anti-racist. But we have to move towards being an anti-racist to where now we're going to help dismantle all of these things. So that was a long answer, but I'll stop there.
Good, thank you.
I love Dr. Ibram Kennedy's work. Yeah, you are either racist or you're anti-racist. There's no middle ground. Reading his book actually helped me to change my definition of racism too. It's a great book to read. So this is layered. It's hard to just pinpoint a few things. I'll say a few things that have worked for some folks that I know is, one, don't put the burden of this on your Black friends that you have, right? If they're willing to sit down and talk with you, that's fine. I have several folks that I'm willing to sit down and talk to, but those are people who are willing to do the work. I don't have time for anyone right now who's not willing to be receptive and not willing to do the work. There is so much literature out there. There are so many podcasts, documentaries, YouTube clips that you don't need to put this burden onto someone. I saw like a Van Jones quote talking about, why colleges are so expensive. It's because people are teaching you something, they're giving you knowledge, and there is a certain amount of labor that is put into that. Well, you ain't paying me tuition, so don't expect that I'm just giving this out.
I love it.
Right? Yeah. Like, ain't my quote. That's his quote. Like, my wife showed me that one. I was like, oh yeah, I need that. There's a great podcast that I love, because typically when we talk about race, we talk about what race means to us as Black people, our experience with race, and that's really valid and that's important. A lot of times our white brothers and sisters don't think about what it means to be white and how race was created, and that this isn't something biological. This is a social construct. And if it was something created, then what does that mean? How do we uphold that? Right. And so there's a podcast called Seen on Radio, and it's season 2. It's called Seen White, SEEING, Seen White. And it's like maybe like 12 episodes or something. There's a study guide that goes along with it. There's a transcript that goes with it. And it's not just someone talking. He's talking to research. It's a white guy working through this with a Black PhD, Chandrai Komanika out of Rutgers. And they're working through research. They're interviewing people. It is powerful. There are books. There are other things that you can go through and you can listen to. Learn more about the history that we were never taught in school, right? A lot of people are just learning that Juneteenth is a thing, or that the terrorist attack of Tulsa, Oklahoma is a thing. That was not an isolated incident. Things like that happen all throughout the country. There was a summer, the Red Summer, where that stuff happened a lot in that one summer, and even outside of that too. Be a student of history. There's another podcast from one of the people from that same podcast called Uncivil. One season's like 10 episodes. It documents stories, real documented stories. These aren't people's opinions. They're citing the facts in this. Documented stories from the Civil War that you never heard about. There was a Black woman in Richmond that was a spy that got information from Jefferson Davis, whatever his name is, got military information from him and gave that information to the Union. Without that information, the Union might have never even won the daggone Civil War. There is so much rich history that we have contributed to that when you really start wrapping your mind around this, you can see these things. Just Mercy. I know the movie's out there. The book is far deeper than the movie. It's great. If you're a Christian, look, you're called to mourn when your other Christians and humans are mourning, right? And there's a great book called Divided by Faith. Phenomenal book. I have a group that I work with, which it's a multiracial group, and we talk about racism. And that book is a great book for Christians. It shows you how racism evolved within the church. The point is, go out here and educate yourself. There's podcasts, there's books, there's clips. Do that. Sit down and talk about it with some other folks who are willing to go through these things too. Don't put that burden on your Black friends, right? And just as a side note to the Black men, let's validate the experiences of Black women, because Black women are going through it. They do not only have to deal with being Black, but have to be a woman as well. And we need to validate and understand that experience too.
Good.
Thank you for that, Wes.
So I'm a models and systems guy, as you can see. So along with ESPM for self-care, I do have a model for how allies and advocates can support. It's called the 3EM model. And number one is 3EM. Number one is exposure. With the news media, with social media, you're exposed to what's been going on for centuries. You're exposed to it, but the exposure isn't enough. The second E is education. So now you're exposed to it. Begin the process of educating yourself about what does this mean? What does Black Lives Matter mean? What does white ally, what does this mean, being an ally? What does white privilege mean? And, we have to start educating ourselves, or you have to start educating yourself on what's going on right now. And a lot of times we're not educated about this because, as Wes mentioned, it wasn't taught to us in school. So therefore, you have to do the work in order to start educating yourself about what's going on in our society right now. And that education does not have to come from a person who's being victimized with what's going on. That's the last person you want to ask to educate. So you have to do the work. If you don't know, you have to do the work to educate yourself. The third E is engagement. Now, once you expose yourself, you educate it, the engagement piece is, how do I fit in? Basically, in layman's terms, find your lane, whatever that is. If you're not the type of person that's going to go to DC and protest, that's fine. You want to do it online, that's fine. If you want to start connecting with other people, that's fine. What's important is a lot of people get excited about these movements. I want to get engaged. I want to do this. I want to sign a petition. And you still dealing with a racist parent. You're dealing with someone in your home that's still contributing to racism. Start at home. Start with mom. Start with dad. Start with granddad. Have these courageous conversations with your family first before you get out here trying to help everybody else. Help yourself. Help your family first, because that's where these things are perpetuated from, within the home. So engage, find your lane, whatever that may be, and do your job, do your part. The last letter, M, is mentor. Find someone who's doing exactly what you want to do. Somebody's doing it. If you think about all this advocacy and these allies, somebody's doing the work that's not Black. Okay? Find that individual, connect with them. How you doing it? What are you doing? How can I help? How can I assist? Find somebody who's doing the work, because there's a lot of people out here doing the work. And we need people like you who are interested in helping and supporting and not dragging us to do the work for you. A lot of people that's protesting is like, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, but I'm still out here because this is what I know how to do.
Yeah.
And as an ally, you're doing the work, so I don't have to, because I've been doing this. We've been doing this for centuries. And to me, if you're using that model, that's a very systematic way of doing it. But, on top of that, how can you do more? And to me, it's being willing to become comfortable, being uncomfortable, having uncomfortable conversations at home first. Because to me, that's the hardest audience you're going to be dealing with.
Yes.
Granddad. Yeah. Yep. Granddad, right? So if you're able to have those conversations at home, then you can start having the conversations outside of the home when it comes to politics and going to local government, state, different things like that. Start at home. But again, we're human first. And it's a lot of flawed humans that's out there that's in your family dealing with some of this, perpetuating these issues that we're dealing with. And, on top of that, like, use your best judgment. Use your best judgment. And sometimes silence, but action speaks a lot louder than the things that you may say online. being quiet, but actually taking action steps. And you don't have to talk about the action that you're doing. Just do the work. We see you.
There you go.
We see you. Just do the work. Shut up and do the work. Real talk. I can't get no plain than that. Just do the work. Because the smallest thing that you can do can influence and change the greater good. Because if you think about how we got here, was the smallest things first, and it escalated to where we are right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I have.
Thank you. So thank you so much for just joining me for this impactful conversation. I mean, I didn't even imagine that it would go this way. I mean, you guys are just awesome. So thank you. So tell everybody how they can find you.
So,
well, go ahead, Dr. Branch. Go ahead, brother.
I'm gonna be quick. The easiest way, www.drjbranch.com. I'm on Instagram, Dr. J Branch, Facebook, Jason Branch. You can Google me. I'm on the front page now. So holla at your boy.
Awesome.
My Twitter is probably the easiest place. It's like a blend of my personal and professional right there. So you can find me on Twitter at Wes_Wade. And I put all my links and my stuff out there, whether it's my podcast, my blogs, articles I write, or whatever. That's the best way to get in contact with me.
Okay.
Yeah, and my website is under construction as we speak, but I am on Twitter at Row Your Boat, ROWURBOTE, ROWBOTE, and also that's on my Instagram and my email address. I can give that out. It's BA Hargett HARGETT 31 at Gmail.
Okay.
BA Hargett 31 at Gmail.
All right, awesome. We'll be adding that to the comments also. So if anybody is watching this, and also Trish, I see you have a question about this being recorded, and yes, it will be recorded. It will be playing on the Research Triangle Counseling page. I believe that you'll be able to download it and share. I'm not sure. I hope so. So I just want to thank everybody who tuned in tonight. I want to thank my expert panelists. This was awesome. We are going to be doing more panel discussions and trainings like this, just thinking about the way forward and what do we do next after, protest. And, now that we have this conversation started, what do we do next? How do we really, really impact and move change forward? So thank you again for joining us. I'm Khalilah Slade. I'm with Research Triangle Counseling. You can find me at researchtrianglecounseling.com. And also my Gmail is researchtrianglecounseling@gmail.com. Thank you so much and have a great night.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank y'all. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Good to see you again, Dr. Branch.
Yeah, it's good to see you all.
All right. Thanks a lot.